Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 13, Ending Explained. The finale of the show is here, and it's time to say goodbye to the Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad universe for what could be forever. In an extended episode that focused on the events that followed on from Marion informing the authorities that she knew Gene was Saul Goodman, we had the closure to the story of James McGill, and also a few flashbacks and familiar faces. So let's get into the episode and recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from it. Here is Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 13, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The final episode picked up with a flashback to Season 5 Episode 8, where we were first introduced to the overall theme of the finale, and that was reflection and regrets. This was personified by the conversation of a time machine, and what one would do if they were faced with the opportunity to go back or forward in time. We saw Mike express his concern for loved ones in the future that he'd be wanting to know if they were okay, showing a compassionate and caring side to the tough-faced Mike. But Jimmy, even when in a situation like he was stuck in, where he was in a desert where he didn't know if he was going to make it out alive or not, he chose to go back in time to invest in Warren Buffett's company, travel to the present day, and become a billionaire, showing that he's always had one thing on his mind: the love of the dollar, the game, and getting rich. The very thing that caused him to get into this mess that he was facing in the present day. Mike put the question to him. That's it. Money. Nothing you'd change. When we then saw his face drop, you could see the internal regrets and things he would change, but he wasn't prepared to face them yet, but they sure were going to be coming. This was also represented in the scene that we saw with Walter White later on in the episode in another flashback. When Walt was asked the question of a time machine, he spoke about the company that he started with Gretchen and Elliot, that he was gradually pushed out of, something that held great importance and would have likely seen him lead a completely different life where he didn't have to get caught up with the RV and Jesse in the first place. Jimmy again, in that situation, said that his regret was that of a slip and fall that he pulled off that went wrong when he did actually injure himself. This was met by Walt saying, "So you've always been like this," showing that the front that he puts up as Saul Goodman has always been embedded within him. But I think it was more so the fact that he just wasn't prepared to face the actions of the past. This was also later reflected again when he did eventually touch on them, and referred to Kim leaving as her moving away and starting again, but how he ran away. Two completely different responses and actions and mindsets to leaving a town. Once we were back in the Gene timeline, we saw it pick up from the moment that he ran out of Marion's house. He fled back to his house, where he went into his box that contained mementos from his old life, where he grabbed a phone from the cupboard and also his box that contained the number to be able to call the best quality vacuum repair service, which is what he did at the end of Breaking Bad, allowing him to get a new identity and become Gene Tarkovic. However, his time was up. He was now hiding in a dumpster and the police had cornered it. Gene Tarkovic's story was over and we were now back to Saul Goodman. There was one moment in this episode where I thought that Jimmy was going to head in a different direction, and it was when we saw him in the holding cell where he was manically laughing at the carving on the wall, and was pacing around saying, "This is how they got you," almost bewildered at the fact that the mighty Saul Goodman was found in a dumpster after being ratted out by Marion, an 80-year-old woman. Maybe he himself even expected it to end differently. We saw Gene recruit Bill Oakley as his advisory attorney, where I feel this wasn't done because he felt he needed advising, but I think he used him because he wanted one of the more bigger names in Albuquerque in his corner, and for him to not look like a madman just stood there representing himself when the odds were stacked against him. So it was merely for appearance. We saw this supported as well when Oakley handed Jimmy a page with a note on it in the hearing, and he didn't really pay much attention to it. It just spared him to carry on with his own actions. We heard all of the charges that were against Jimmy in this situation, and he was looking at life plus 190 years, which was a mammoth sentence that he was facing. We saw him not really paying attention to the sentencing that was taking place, because in his mind he knew what he was going to do in order to get himself out of the situation. He called in Marie Schrader, where it was great to see her appearing in the universe again. The widow of Hank, the DEA agent in Breaking Bad. She acted as the only real human in the room, and that was her purpose. Whilst both parties had their best interest at heart, which was Saul getting a better sentence and the officers getting a criminal convicted, Marie was the only person that had a human connection to a victim, and despite having a subjective view, she knew that the sentence shouldn't be shortened. Jimmy had worked out a way to make it play out like he was a victim of Walter White and that he was caught up in all of his mess ever since he was kidnapped in Season 2, Episode 8 of Breaking Bad. He was claiming that he was fearful for his own life, and this is how it would be positioned as the reason why he was working with Walt, because he was afraid of the repercussions. Something we knew wasn't true at all, but it was the fear of one juror believing the story that gave Jimmy the bargaining power to be able to get his sentence shortened to 7.5 years. Due to the information that he was prepared to give up. We saw that even when behind bars, facing a mammoth sentence that was unimaginable and a mountain to get out of, Jimmy was still able to talk his way out of the mess that he was in and have a somewhat upper hand. This was until he was going to spill some information on the Howard Hamlin case, but he didn't realize that Kim had already gone to the court with a statement of events that occurred on the night that he died. You could sense that Jimmy didn't like the fact that he was unaware of this. The close-up shot of the dead eyes, heavy breathing, and blank expressions spoke 1,000 words. Following this, we cut to the plane journey to New Mexico from Omaha, and we saw that he was thinking about another way that he'd be able to get his sentence shortened down. And this was by providing something that had the potential to put Kim in deeper water. However, after hearing that she was going to lose it all, you could sense his change in heart. After this, we cut to Kim living out in Florida, where we saw that she was still unhappy with her life, not making any decisions as she didn't know who she truly was, and was working at Palm Coast Sprinklers. However, we saw that she had enough and joined the local law firm as a volunteer, her first glimpse into her old life, and it actually looked the happiest that we'd seen her there. This was then when she got a phone call from Suzanne where she explained that Jimmy had been arrested in Omaha, and that he was getting extradited to New Mexico for the hearing. You could sense that she was fearful of what he was going to say, and that pushed her to go to the hearing. The nervousness wasn't stopped when she was there, as her foot was relentlessly tapping whilst she sat watching it all unfold. No emotion, completely still, other than her foot which was rattling with anxiety. We cut to the venue of the trial where the song All Things Are Possible was being played as Jimmy was entering the courtroom in one of his classic suits. The lyrics All Things Are Possible If Only You Believe suited the scene perfectly. What we expected was not what we got, and it showed that anything was possible. And that was the change in direction of Saul Goodman. "It's showtime," was the first thing that he said as he sat down after looking at Kim. This show was for her, and it was all about to unfold. As the hearing got underway, we saw that Jimmy wanted to be referred to as Saul Goodman, and as the judge was questioning the agent on the fact that the sentence was reduced drastically, the show did well begin. We saw Jimmy take the stand and repeat the speech that he spoke in the interrogation room where the deal was bargained about how he was kidnapped, held over the grave, and was fearful of Walter White. But then he went on to elaborate on the fact that he was pivotal to Walter White's operation and empire, and that if he hadn't met him, then Walter would have likely ended up dead or in prison long before his eventual demise. He mentioned how Walter White wouldn't have been able to have done anything that he did without him. This was a powerful monologue and shifted the change in direction. I thought at first this was an ego thing. It really reminded me of the speech that Walt gave to Skylar when she was fearful of his life, and he turned around and stated that he was the person who came knocking, and how the Empire couldn't run without him. But then it carried on, and we saw that it wasn't that. This was an arc of redemption for Jimmy. He was facing his regrets head on, and we saw the real, human side to Jimmy that we've not seen for many years. A person who felt things and was going to face the repercussions. He told the judge that he lied about Kim's involvement in the Howard Hamlin case, and the constant looking back at Kim for reassurance and validation that we saw in this episode was similar to what we saw when he was showing off about his office to her when they were signing the divorce papers. He wants her approval and nothing more. We saw him state how after the events of Howard's death, Kim left town and started over, but he stated that when he left town, he ran away. They did the same things at different points in their life, but they were two completely different approaches, and you could sense that he understood that. He also faced his actions for his contribution in his brother Chuck's death in hurting him and ruining his career. Jimmy was at the stand facing all of his demons, and it was something that he'd never done before. As was symbolized in the flashbacks, this was a man that faces nothing of his past, and chooses to just put it behind him and move on. But just like the box that he kept at his apartment when he was Gene, filled with his life as Saul Goodman, he was doing the same at the stand, but in a mental capacity, opening the lid on all of his regrets and wrongdoings. From that moment, he wanted to be referred to as James McGill, showing that the character had gone back to his roots and he was done with the fronts and personas that he used as walls. We started the episode as Gene when he got caught, He was interrogated and wanted to be referred to as Saul, and it closed off with him returning as James McGill. We then left the courtroom with Jimmy and Kim looking at each other, and Jimmy genuinely looking the most like himself that we'd seen in a long while, filled with remorse, sympathy, and regret, as Kim now looked him in the eye. After this, the final flashback in the episode occurred, and it was of Jimmy and Chuck. You could sense the bitterness and jealousy in the undertones of the conversation when Jimmy was talking about his clients, but Chuck was stating how they were still just as valuable. But Jimmy being who he is, he always wanted more. We heard an important line from Chuck: "If you don't like where you're heading, there's no shame in going back and changing your path." We then had a shot of the book called The Time Machine, which is where the theme of time travel and the link with going back and changing something was met on screen. It was rather fitting that this was coming as advice from his older brother as well. So what happened to Jimmy? Well, he ended up in the one prison that he didn't want to end up in, ADX Montrose. He was recognized on the bus as Saul Goodman, and the prisoners were chanting "Better Call Saul." He had helped a lot of criminals over the years get lesser sentences or get off of their sentences completely. So there was a mutual respect for the work that he'd done, and you could see that he was likely going to get on okay in jail, due to the fact that they appreciated all that he'd done over the years. There was a familiar shot of the mixing bowl that we saw when he was working in Cinnabon, but this time it was for baking bread in jail. I think that this was something that showed that even in his life as Gene working in Cinnabon, it was like a prison for him. A life he truly didn't want to lead, living under a false identity, out of the game, and not being his true self. We then saw Kim practicing as a lawyer because her New Mexico bar card didn't have an expiration date, meaning that she could meet with Jimmy in jail. We then had a scene of both Jimmy and Kim mirroring a shot that we saw when they first met in season 1 of the show, where they were leaning on the wall, providing a full circle moment to the pair. We heard that Jimmy was now going to be serving 86 years for his crimes, instead of the 7 years that he originally got it down to. It's the price to pay for confronting his past. The final scene of the show was something that I thought was perfect. Jimmy on one side of the fence whilst Kim was on the other. Two people that were entangled up in each other's mess, that were truly in love at one point, both doing bad things, but different paths and fates were met for both of them. This was symbolized by the shot that captured both sides at once. We got the iconic Saul Goodman firing of the fingers, and then we saw from Kim's point of view her walk around the corner and Jimmy gradually get out of sight as the wall took the main sight of vision. And that was the last we saw of Jimmy. Wow, it was powerful. Walt was dead, Jesse on the run, and Saul in prison for the rest of his days. Justice was served, but in the end, something far more powerful and meaningful happened to the character. He understood himself, faced his demons, his past, and the things he'd been hiding away. He did the right thing. As much as I would have loved an epic death for Jimmy, he's got the respect of the inmates in jail, and he'll most probably be as comfortable as one can be there. But spending the rest of his days locked away was the right way for the show to end. It's a shame Better Call Saul is over, but it was one ride that certainly will not be forgettable. So, there you have it. Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 13, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Better Call Saul such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you want to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of the season finale? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.